you turn into wine. You open the eyes of the blind. There's no one like you, none like you. Into the darkness you shine, out of the ashes we rise. There's no one like you, none like you. 'Cause our God is greater, our God is stronger. God, you are higher than any other. Our God is healer, He's awesome in power. Our God, our God. Our God is greater, our God is stronger. God, you are higher than any other. Our God is healer, awesome in power. Our God, our God. Into the darkness you shine, and out of the ashes we rise. There's no one like you, none like you. Our God is greater, our God is stronger. God, you are higher than any other. Our God is healer, awesome in power. Our God, our God. Our God is greater, our God is stronger. God, you are higher than any other. Our God is healer, awesome in power. Our God, our God. And if our God is for us, then who could ever stop us? And if our God is with us, then what could stand against? And if our God is for us, then who could ever stop us? And if our God is with us, then what could stand against? Yes, our God is greater, our God is stronger. God, you are higher than any other. Our God is healer, awesome in power. Our God, our God. Yes, our God is greater, our God is stronger. God, you are higher than any other. Our God is healer, awesome in power. Our God, our God. You are the source of life. I can't be left behind. No one else will do. I will take hold of you, 'cause I need you, Jesus, to come to my rescue. Tell me, where else can I go? There's no other name by which I am saved. Won't you capture me with grace? I will follow you. I will follow you. You I can't be left behind. No one else will do. I will take hold of you, 'cause I need you, Jesus, to come to my rescue. Tell me, where else can I go? There's no other name by which I am saved. Won't you capture me with grace? 'Cause I need you, Jesus, to come to my rescue. Tell me, where else can I go? There's no other name by which I am saved. Won't you capture me with grace? And I will follow you. And I will follow you. This world is nothing for me.
I will follow you.
This world is nothing for me.
I will follow you.
This world is nothing for me.
I will follow you.
This world is nothing for me. 'Cause I need you, Jesus, to come to my rescue. Tell me, where else can I go? There's no other name by which I am saved. Won't you capture me with grace? 'Cause I need you, Jesus, to come to my rescue. Tell me, where else can I go? There's no other name by which I am saved. Won't you capture me with grace? I will follow you. I will follow you. I'm forgiven. I'm forgiven because you were forsaken. I'm accepted. You were condemned. I'm alive and well. Your spirit is within me because you died and rose again. Amazing love, how can it be that you, my King, should die for me? Amazing love, I know it's true. It's my joy to honor you. Amazing love. Amazing love, how can it be that you, my King, should die for me? Amazing love, I know it's true. It's my joy to honor you in all I do, to honor you. You are my King. You are my King. Jesus, you are my King. You are my King. You are my King. You are my King. Jesus, you are my King. You are my King. Amazing love. Amazing love, how can it be that you, my King, should die for me? Amazing love, I know it's true. It's my joy to honor you. Amazing love, how can it be that you, my King, should die for me? Amazing love, I know it's true. It's my joy to honor you in all I do, to honor you in all I do, to honor you in all I do, to honor you.
Since it's Palm Sunday, let's do that. You are my King.
You are my King. You are my King. Jesus, you are my King. You are my King. You are my King. You are my King. Jesus, you are my King. You are my King.
Light of the world, you step down into darkness. Oh, bow down. Here I am to say that you're my God. You're altogether lovely, altogether worthy, altogether wonderful to me. Here I am to worship, here I am to bow down, here I am to say that you're my God. You're altogether lovely, altogether worthy, altogether wonderful to me. King of all days, oh so highly exalted, glorious in heaven above. Humbly you came to the earth you created, all for love's sake became home. Here I am to worship, here I am to bow down, here I am to say that you're my God. You're altogether lovely, altogether worthy, altogether wonderful to me. Here I am to worship, here I am to bow down, here I am to say that you're my God. You're altogether lovely, altogether worthy, altogether wonderful to me. And I'll never know how much it cost to see my sin upon that cross. And I'll never know how much it cost to see my sin upon that cross. Here I am to worship, here I am to bow down, here I am to say that you're my God. You're altogether lovely, altogether worthy, altogether wonderful to me. Here I am to worship, here I am to bow down, here I am to say that you're my God. You're altogether lovely, altogether worthy, altogether wonderful to me.
So we'll be in Genesis chapter 37 today as we continue on through Genesis, and we're nearing. Alan was talking to this morning about a chapter coming up that centers on Judah, and I'll tell you what, I'm excited to get there because there's some big things there that I was surprised. But so in chapter 37, as now we turn into the rest of Genesis, the last portion of it. The story begins to center on Jacob's 11th son, the one who was born to his most beloved wife Rachel, and his name is Joseph. So as we open chapter 37, we rejoin this family when Joseph was 17 years old, which is really, really young when we start getting into it and you see what he's about to endure and suffer. So Genesis chapter 37, verse 1, it says, "And Jacob dwelt in the land wherein his father was a stranger, in the land of Canaan. These are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brethren. And the lad was with the sons of Bilhah and with the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought unto his father their evil report. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children because he was a son of his old age, and he made him a coat of many colors. And we've all heard of the coat of many colors. There's plays, there's songs. Dolly Parton did a song, A Coat of Many Colors. That's a common term. So as we look at what is about to transpire in Joseph's life, his problems really began before he was even born. His problems began with his grandparents because of their conduct. Because his grandparents taught their two sons that favoritism within the family is normal and accepted. Isaac, if you remember, Isaac and Rebekah showed favoritism between Jacob and Esau. And then that passes, generationally, that passes. In turn, as an adult, Jacob had showed favoritism to one of his 4 wives, Rachel. And now, as we're at a point in the story where Rachel has passed on, Jacob is showing favoritism towards her son, Joseph, from amongst his 12 sons. He's number 11 of the 12. And this favoritism in the family was well known by his other siblings. It was no secret that he was favored. You know, if you remember back in chapter 33, when Jacob was afraid that his brother Esau was going to attack, he put Rachel and Joseph behind the rest of the family to protect them. The thought process was if Esau came with hostility and attacked, that maybe Rachel and Joseph could slip away. Maybe they could escape because he loved them more than his other wives and other children. And you think, put yourself in their situation. That would tend to give you an attitude that I am expendable more so than this younger brother of mine. Well, Joseph at this point is 17 years old, but these seeds of jealousy have been firmly planted into his brothers, into his siblings. So as we look at the scripture today, we see that Joseph was out tending the herds with the sons of Jacob's concubines, his half-brothers. Now I want you, as we look at this today, I think it is a nice fitting that we're in Palm Sunday, because you start to see, I want you to look as we go through that Joseph is a foreshadowing of Jesus. That Jesus gave God a bad report on his Jewish brothers, just as Joseph came back and gave his father a bad report. Now, the brothers here will have been Dan and Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. So Joseph is out tending sheep with them, and he comes back and he gives a bad report on the others, and we don't know what the others were doing. It doesn't matter. We're not told. But we're told this because we begin to see more and more of the resentment that they have towards Joseph. Not only is he the favorite son, he's the rule follower in the family. He's the goody two-shoes, if you will. So we have this strained relationship between Joseph and his brothers, but then comes this day. Then comes this day that Jacob gives Joseph this special gift. It's a beautiful robe. And your Bibles, probably all your Bibles call it a coat of many colors. Something happened on this day. This event set him apart. It showed him special. They thought in their heads that he was treated special. This confirmed it. And I think this is a foreshadowing of what happened to Jesus on Palm Sunday. You know, the religious scribes and Pharisees and Sadducees, they had the same kind of resentment towards Jesus. And it was when he came riding into Jerusalem on that Palm Sunday, he was being treated like a king. It said to them, we've got a problem. Just as this presentation of this robe to Joseph said to his brothers, the problem we thought we had is a real problem. Right here it is staring us in the face. And then that day, you see, everyone had a coat. We would call it a robe. And to them, in that culture, their robe was an important tool. Of course, it helped to keep them warm when the nights turned cold. They used it. They bring up to him and use it to carry things. It was valuable to them. Now, these were people who didn't have lots of material possessions, and sometimes they used their robe as a down payment on a loan. If you'll loan me this tool, I'll leave my robe. And then that way you know your shovel, whatever it is, coming back. And although this is commonly known as a coat of many colors, it's known that because it's a really difficult passage to translate from the Hebrew. And many of the scholars today agree that what is actually described was a long-sleeved robe, not only a long hem robe, long sleeve. It was not one that was designed for work. And at the presentation of this gift to Joseph, this would have been an immediate problem to his brothers because they had robes. They were short hem robes, short sleeve robes designed for work, designed for movement. And this long sleeve, flowing, if you want, long draping hem robe that Jacob gave to Joseph wasn't a robe of a laborer. This is sending a different signal. It was the robe of a leader. So there's an unspoken message that was transferred here, that Joseph was going to be the family leader, that Jacob was no longer going to expect him to be toiling in the fields, tending sheep and doing all the work that they did. So this was the confirmation of their fears. But what it actually did, what this really did, was it turned the jealousy that the brothers had for Joseph into downright hatred. They began to despise him. Verse 4 says, when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him. And they could not speak peaceably to him. And Joseph dreamed a dream, and he told it to his brethren, and they hated him that much more. And he said to them, here, I pray you this dream which I have dreamed, for behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaf arose and stood upright. And behold, your sheaves stood around about and made obeisance to my sheaf. And brethren said to him, shalt thou indeed reign over us? Is that what this dream means? You're dreaming that you're going to reign over us? Or shalt thou indeed have dominion over us? And they hated him even more. So you see this animosity growing and growing and growing. They couldn't even speak a peaceable word to him. Joseph had this dream, and the robe was confirmation of what they feared. This dream, like, how dare you dream that? We see how you're favored. We see this special gift our Father gave you, and like you're not going to be out working with us anymore. And then you tell us you dreamed this dream, and we're bowing down to you. And they hated him. Their hatred just kept growing. People have this tendency, and boy, you can see it today. People have this tendency to resent other people who have integrity. You see it in all the protests against the police officers. People hate people with integrity. This was Jesus' problem. Throughout his ministry, 3 years of ministry, but especially when he came to Jerusalem that last time, this was his problem. He was a man of integrity. And the religious leaders had none. And they hated him. Joseph was better than his brothers were morally. They hated the fact that he would tell their dad what their bad things were. They hated the fact that he was the favorite of their dad, even though it wasn't his fault. They hated the fact that he had to receive this special coat, and they hated the fact that now he was a dreamer. We don't care what our Father's giving you. You're not going to rule over us. You're dreaming. You're dreaming you are. Verse 9, and he dreamed yet another dream and told it to his brothers and said, behold, I have dreamed a dream more. And behold, the sun, the moon, and 11 stars made obeisance to me. And he told it to his father and to his brethren. And his father rebuked him and said to him, what is this dream that thou hast dreamed? So I and thy mother and thy brethren indeed come to bow ourselves to thee, to the earth. His brothers envied him. But his father observed the saying. You know, if things in the family weren't bad enough, Joseph has yet another dream. And this time he saw the sun, the moon, the 11 stars representing the whole family, even including parents. You know, you say, well, his mother is already deceased, but he had these stepmothers, these 3 stepmothers. And he told this dream to his family, and Jacob immediately recognized or understood that it meant that he and even his wives would bow down to Joseph. And the whole family understood the dream. I think because the brothers, there's all this hatred growing, all this animosity. Jacob scolded Joseph for sharing this dream. Nevertheless, he remembered. He remembered the dream. He remembered the event. And that reminds me of when Jesus was born. Remember, Scripture says of Mary that she kept all these things in her heart. And she noted the spatial situation in Luke 2:19. And this is the way it is. Sometimes we get significant information from God that we just don't purely understand. And when those times come when you are in a situation you don't understand the whys or the hows, you should commit those things to memory and just wait for God to show you the why and the how. Now this particular dream is huge in helping us to understand Revelation chapter 12, where John describes there what he saw. And he says, and there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. So we look at this book of Genesis, and we look at the dream of Joseph, and then we jump forward to Revelation, and we can know that although there have been many through the years who have tried to say Revelation chapter 12 is talking about the church, we go back to this dream of Joseph, and we say this is the same thing. That Revelation chapter 12 is speaking of the nation of Israel. Jacob understood this. He understood clearly that the sun and moon were references to he and his wives, and the 11 stars, the rest of the brothers. And you know, envy is a burning passion that eats at a person from within. It's a bad thing. It's a bad thing to be envious of anyone for anything. Because once that starts eating at the person, it starts opening the door for all kinds of evil. Envy is strong. Envy led to the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. Religious leaders in that day were envious of him. There's so much detail we're not given. But we've read that the brothers hated him, that they couldn't even speak a kind word to him. And we don't know what day-to-day life was like for him in that family. We don't know about all the shoves, the trips, the elbows. And more painful than any of it, the exclusion. Can you imagine in the evening when when the other 11 brothers were sitting around talking and laughing, and Joseph was excluded? But it would get worse. It would get worse for him. Verses 12 through 21, you can see that if you read verses 12 through 21, you can see that indeed this coat was given with intentions. The way the brothers understood it was exactly the way it was. If you read those verses, the one thing that should jump out at you is that Jacob is no longer out tending flocks with his brothers. He's not out laboring as he was. When the chapter opened, he was out with his brothers with the sheep. Now he's not. He's going to be sent out to check on them. His dad is using him as a leader. When he was at home with his father, one day when Jacob wanted him to go check on his brothers. So he sent Joseph to Shechem to see how his brothers were doing with the sheep. Now, once you cross over some boundaries in life, you cannot uncross those boundaries. Once you've lied to someone, the second lie comes easier. Once you have stolen from someone, it's easier to steal from that person again. Once you've abused the trust of someone in any way, the boundary that you've crossed is no longer there to restrain you. What was out of bounds before is now within bounds to you. If you're married, once you've cheated on a husband or wife, what was unthinkable to you the day you got married has now become possible. And in the future, probably probable. The sons of Jacob had went to Shechem to tend sheep. Do you remember that place? We were just there not too long ago. It's a place where some boundaries and some borders were crossed. It's a place where they were at when their sister Dinah, having had intercourse with one of the Canaanites, jeopardizing the group's genetic identity, boundaries were crossed. And trying to reestablish that boundary, Simeon and Levi, if you remember, had those men, the Shechemite men, to undergo circumcision. And when they were incapacitated, they walked into their homes and they killed all the men. A boundary was crossed. They committed murder. This is why our society is in such dire circumstances, because too many boundaries have been crossed and we can't uncross them. Every time you push the boundary out further to something that used to be out of bounds is now acceptable, that's where you live, and then you push the boundary again and something else is acceptable, and we get less and less moral all the time. These brothers had went to Shechem, a place where murder became a possibility for them. As I've told you many times, sometimes you need to think of where God manifested himself in your life, and sometimes maybe you need to go back to that spot so you remember that. There's a negative image of that. And sometimes when someone goes back to where they cross that boundary, where they sin that sin, that comes back to them too. And that's back in their mind. So these brothers were back in that area where they had committed murders, and this had to be in their minds. Again, as I say over and over and over, there's no useless information in the Bible. And the reason that we're told that they went to Shechem, but they weren't there, we're told Joseph went there first, that they'd been there before they moved on to Dothan, is so that we can understand their mindset. And not finding them there, Joseph went on. Someone told him that they'd went to Dothan. And when the brothers saw him approaching, they said, we should kill him. Here comes the dreamer. We should kill him. After all, if he dies, what then becomes of his dreams? How will his dreams come to pass if we do away with him? We'll put an end to this nonsense now. But the eldest son, Reuben, who we just read about, stopped them from killing Joseph. In verse 22, it says, Reuben said to them, shed no blood, but cast him in this pit which is in the wilderness, and lay no hand upon him, that we might rid him out of their hands. That he might rid him out of their hands to deliver him to his father again. Now, we was just with Reuben last week and looked at his indiscretion with one of his stepmothers. Let me tell you a little more about Reuben. Remember, we just looked at, he slept with his father's wife, his stepmother, Bilhah. The Jewish tradition suggests that she was drunken and passed out. And that Reuben took advantage of her in that condition, wanting to take authority away from his father and to himself. That he was worried about Jacob favoring Joseph, and he was the eldest son, the one who the birthright should go to. So he's trying to force that issue. And Jewish tradition says, and we read last week that Jacob learned of it. Jewish tradition says that the two never spoke again. That Jacob and Reuben never spoke again. Well, now that's not a very good position to be in if you're anticipating the birthright, if you're vying for the birthright, and your dad's not speaking to you. So here's one of these places I'm speculating. I'm reading between the lines, I'm speculating. I want you to know that. But here Reuben talks his brothers into not killing Joseph and instead putting him in a pit. They think to die, but as we can read, his intentions were to go back to get Joseph in verse 22 and return him to their father. To me, it seems like a really selfish ploy on Reuben's part, trying to get back on the good side of Dad. If I go back and tell Dad that the other brothers were going to kill him, and I saved him and I return him, maybe this relationship will start anew. Maybe I can get back in line for the birthright, which I've been working for. You remember Jacob, the dad, had been known as the deceiver most of his life. And you can see, just as favoritism was passed in his family, so was deception. Reuben was deceiving his other brothers with his rescue plan, saying, let's put him in a pit and let's let him die there. Again, let's pause and let's see the foreshadowing of Jesus. Joseph was sent to check on his brothers, and he refused to accept him as a leader. It's just as Jesus was sent to the Jewish people who refused him and rejected him as king and Messiah. Joseph's brothers instead make this plot to kill him, just as the Pharisees and the Sadducees were plotting to kill Jesus. You see this foreshadowing going on. Joseph's brothers, mentally, they have killed him. They've put him in a pit to die. They're left from dead, and in a future day, they're going to see him alive again, as if though he's resurrected. You see foreshadowing goes on here? And think about this situation from Joseph's perspective. He's 17 years old, again excluded from fellowship with his brothers, sent to check on him. They throw you in a pit that you can't get out of, and there's no water, leaving you to die. And I think right here is where Joseph begins to learn how God is sovereign, how God's sovereign in his life, even when he didn't understand why the situation was the way it was. And this is one of the things that Christians struggle with all the time. It's like, why? You've all heard the question over and over and over. Maybe you've asked, why does God allow bad things to happen to good people? If I'm a Christian, if I've been involved in the church, how could this have possibly happened to me? As if though, as long as we're members of the church, that we're staying on base and the boogeyman can't get us. Well, many times we don't understand the reasons why things happen. Just as Joseph, when he was in the pit, I guarantee you didn't understand why things were happening. He didn't know what the future held. When bad things happen to us, we may well not, we probably won't know why they're happening. Maybe we won't know in this lifetime why these things happen. Maybe it won't be until we get into heaven and we're shown clearly. I think we'll be blown away how God has weaved this intricate fabric of experience, human experience. How this event in my life, which I didn't think anything of, affected these other three people, and then they affected, and you have this beautiful weaving together. You know, perhaps something's going to happen to you. Maybe you're going to experience an event in your life that may serve as an example to someone in the future. Consider Joseph. Consider 17-year-old Joseph down in a dry pit that he can't get out of. Thinking, why is this happening? Why do my brothers hate me? Do you think he had a thought that 3,900 years later, you'd be reading about his experience and seeing how God works? Everything that happens to you is God filtered for a purpose. Nothing happens to you that God doesn't allow to happen. He doesn't cause it all, but he allows. Verse 23, it says, and it came to pass when Joseph would come to his brothers, and they stripped him out of his coat. And they took him and cast him into a pit, and the pit was empty. There was no water in it. So when they put him in this pit, and it's a cistern, they actually, archaeologists have found skeletons down in pits in this area. Like, this was not an uncommon way to horribly do away with someone. That they drop them down in these straight-walled cisterns and leave them there. And, 4 or 5 days, no water, you're dead. The robe represented Joseph's position of leadership. Stripping him out of that robe was symbolic. It was purposed. I think it's a foreshadowing again of Jesus at the crucifixion when the Roman guards stripped him. When they cast lots for his clothing. Verse 25, and they sat down to eat bread. They lifted up their eyes and looked, and behold, a company of Ishmaelites. You remember Ishmael, these are his descendants, came from Gilead with their camels bearing spicery and balm and myrrh, going to carry it down to Egypt. And Judah said to his brethren, what profit is it if we slay our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother in our flesh. And his brethren were content or agreeable. So seeing this caravan of Ishmaelite traders, Judah got this idea, and whether or not he was doing it out of a desire to save Joseph's life or to make money, I don't know. But he, like Reuben, was suggesting maybe we shouldn't kill our brother. Maybe we shouldn't have his blood on our hands. And what profit is that? Hey guys, there's an opportunity for us to make a coin or two. So they put Joseph in this pit, and they were sitting a ways off. I don't know how far off, a ways off. I read other things that said Joseph was crying out for help. That would be irritating to your conscience. So I think if you go set up camp for tonight, a far off means out of earshot. So they were at their camp, and actually when you turn to Genesis chapter 42, verse 21, you'll see that Joseph was crying out for help. It says, and they said one to another, we are very guilty concerning our brother in that we saw the anguish of his soul. This is when they've come back to Egypt, to Joseph. They're remembering. When he begged us and we would not hear. Therefore, is this distress come upon us? So they drop him in this hole. They're sitting out of earshot. They don't want to hear him. And they see these Ishmaelites. And Judah says, let's sell him. Let's get some coins in our pockets. I think this is a little humorous myself. In verse 28, then there passed by Midianites, merchants, and they drew and lifted Joseph out of the pit and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver, and they brought Joseph to Egypt. So while their brothers were thinking, maybe we should do this, maybe we should do that, these Midianites, man, they're merchants. They come upon a guy in a pit. What are you going to do? You're going to take him up here and sell these other people for a slave. They put coins in their pockets. His brothers had none. So Joseph was on his way to Egypt. Verse 29, Reuben returned to the pit, and he beheld Joseph was not in the pit, and he tore his clothes, and he returned to his brothers and said, the child is not. Where will I go? He's not in the pit. Where will I go? Well, that's kind of a telling statement. And I think my speculations earlier are right. Joseph was my greatest opportunity, my greatest chance to reconcile with our Father. He's gone from the pit. What's my chances now? So Joseph was rejected by his brothers and sold. And again, it's a type and foreshadowing of Christ, who was rejected by his brethren and sold for 30 pieces of silver by Judas Iscariot. Verse 31, they took Joseph's coat and killed a kid of the goats and dipped the coat in the blood, and they set the coat of many colors, and they brought it to their father and said, this we have found. Know now whether it be thy son's coat or no. And he knew it, and he said, this is my son's coat. An evil beast has devoured him. Joseph is without doubt rent in pieces, and Jacob tore his clothes and put sackcloth upon his loins and mourned for his son many days. So the brothers, not finding Joseph, their youngest, or next to youngest brother, took his robe that they'd taken off and tore it up, smeared goat's blood on it, and went to lie to dear old dad about what had happened. When Jacob saw the robe, he assumed that Joseph was dead, and he began to mourn. And even this is interesting. If you remember that years earlier, Jacob himself had deceived his dad, Isaac, in Genesis chapter 27, as he pretended to remember to be Esau, and he put a goat's skin on his hand so that he was hairy like his brother. And now here his sons, inheriting that deception, are deceiving him by using a goat. And I think it's interesting that sometimes God will find these little ways to remind you of your shortcomings. Verse 35, and all his sons and his daughters and all his sons and all the daughters, see daughters, plural, but there's more than Dinah. He had other daughters. Rose up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted, and he said, well, I go down to the grave until my son mourning. Thus his father wept for him, and the Midianites sold him in Egypt unto Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh's and captain of the guard. So Joseph was taken down to Egypt, where he's sold to an influential man named Potiphar, the captain of the guard. So Joseph ends up, his brothers want him dead, he ends up in the home of an influential Egyptian. So the chapter opened with Joseph being a favored son. It closes with him being a slave in a Pharaoh's house. It ends with all the brothers being guilty of immense hatred towards their own brother. Here are some folks that need to be taught a lesson. These are men who are going to be the fathers of each of the tribes of Israel. And as we go on, and Jim, I'm about done. As we go on, we're going to see that God is indeed teaching these men some humility. Is he indeed going to teach them about his sovereignty? And it's so interesting to me, at this point in Genesis, we've seen it all along, but at this point in Genesis, God's not working with righteous people. I love the honesty of the Bible. It's not polishing up these people. Much of this journey has been lewd. Much of this journey makes us maybe cringe to read about it. Reuben laying with his mother, Lot's daughters, rape, incest. It's not a beautiful picture. As we go into what's known as the Passion Week, you know, maybe there's an opportunity for you to speak to someone. Maybe the ground's a little softer this week. Maybe the subject matter exists. The question is, will you be bold enough? May God richly bless you. May his Spirit dwell upon you and give you boldness. The clock is ticking. Time is running out. Jesus is coming back. There are an awful lot of people going to be left behind. I wonder if we can snatch some out of the disasters that are coming. Go in peace, Go with boldness this week. Be a blessing. Thank you.